Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. Really pleased today to be joined by Dr. Jacqui Taylor. Great to have you here today.
Delighted to be with you here today, Matt.
Yeah, really looking forward to the conversation. I know from our chat beforehand, there's lots of really interesting topics we could get into. I think the challenge is going to be refining this, but let's see where we end up. But to kick things off, do you want to let people know a little bit about what it is that you do and who you work with?
Okay, so I'm Dr. Jacqui Taylor. I'm CEO of Flying Binary. That's the basis on which you'll hear me today. We're a web science company that changes the world with deep tech. I'll explain all these terms. And so far, we've positively impacted over half the world's population, and we're working on the other half right now. But as a background, because sometimes it's nice to know where people came from, I'm an aerospace engineer, but today I'm one of the top 10 innovators in the industrial Internet of Things, which I'll also explain. And I work for the UK government, which is where the origins of what I'm going to talk about today started, the European Commission and the UN and their 198 member states on all things to do with technology. And the basis of that is a research arc from AD 350 through to 2400, so as opposed to 22 anything, and 24 anything, 2400. And then the actual scientific research is a 29-year longitudinal scientific research base on a single thing. What impact will technology, IIoT, industrial Internet of Things technology, have on our society? And the mission that we as a company drive that research from is leaving no one behind.
Amazing. No, sounds really, really interesting and definitely with my background in tech and coaching, definitely areas of interest. But just to break some of that down for people, IIoT, exactly, what does that mean? What's that about?
So you'll all be aware of OpenAI unleashing ChatGPT on the world in November 2022. Many of you are saying it's never been the same since, Jacqui. Totally correct. And so the industrial Internet of Things is the thing beyond what you're seeing now. So the technology you're all using is the technology that happens beyond that. Well, how will you know? What does that look like? There will be no human in the loop. So we will, as creators and as coaches, will not be involved in that. I have one of my London hubs where there isn't a human that runs that hub. It is run by robots. So, I'm not talking about it, I'm living it. And that's not here for us, apart from if you're in Ukraine today. In Ukraine, some of the technology of what I'm talking about, where there's no human in the loop, is protecting 30 million Ukrainians with technology doing the humanitarian piece of it. And that's 13 years from now, roughly, when that technology will be made available commercially. I'm talking to you as a coach myself. This session that Matt and I are curating is around that transition, which is going to be very disruptive over the next 10 years or so, but certainly potentially 30, where everything we do as coaches will need to change because we need to be the humans in the loop.
Yeah, no, fascinating. I think, many people, seeing the ChatGPT 2 years ago coming out, started to experiment. Most people, very, very surface level. Some people just think it's nonsense. Some, burying their head in the sands a little bit. Some people, a little bit scared about, what does that mean for me as a coach or consultant? Are people using that? And then, you're talking to many things where, the human can be taken out of the loop, but there's definitely a place as well for, human productivity to be augmented by those technologies as well. How do you see that kind of human involvement, if you like, shifting?
Well, the way that all of my 29 years of research has been focused on beyond the mission, a single focus. How do we put humans at the heart of the industrial Internet of Things? What does that look like? Because there is something you may have heard about called Society 4.0. That means get rid of humans, the robots take over, all of that. That's not my work. my work is about. And I do build theory of mind AI, which is the step just before artificial general intelligence, but it's more than AI. It's not really about that. And if people have got doubts about those models, I'm here to tell you I know those models well. You should have doubts. Don't make any decisions that affects the trajectory of your business with them. And I don't care who hears me say that. The reality of it is they are flawed, and we do know that internally within the industry. So just be cognizant of what you're using it for, and if that fundamentally affects your business and the way it might grow, proceed with caution would be my view on that. And so
Yeah, yeah.
the reality of it going forward is it will all change. And what you've seen with the large language models are not really the start of it. That's not actually the change I'm talking about. My change is talking about where we had 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, the foundation of the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee, and what we're doing today, what Matt and I are doing today in curating this. That was unknown to many of you at that time. And yet, what I'm talking about is almost press reset on that whole world. And it's hugely exciting, but it has machines doing the repetitive efficiencies. And then for us as coaches to look at what value add we bring into that machine world.
Yeah, I see. And so to work out what value we can add as coaches and how to inject that human element, then how do we know what that future could look like? How do we prepare for that in order to know how best to integrate with that?
Yeah. And I'm here today because I've already done that with my coaching business. So there's not a question of can it be done? I've done it, and I will share some of that as Matt and I get through the interview. And so it's very much to say, if you haven't done anything to think about that industrial Internet of Things future before this conversation, this is your go flag. And of course, Matt, with the platform, will be supporting all of that. So I know I'm speaking to a community that wherever you're at, you've got the support because the platform is the support. And I'm here to share that future, but also say how I've transformed my coaching business to work in that future and hopefully give you some inspiration as to what you can do.
Yeah, yeah. No, fantastic. So, yeah, I guess for people that are just coming to this new now as their wake up call, what could that future look like? If they are, not exposed to that at the moment. Fast forward a number of years for now, what's changed?
I think one of the things you will be aware of, let's start with what we do know. We have had a destabilizing geopolitical environment, obviously with the full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the impact that's had around the geopolitical environment. That is going to continue. That's likely to get much more disruptive. So what I've said to the coaches I train and my clients, buckle up. It's going to be a rough ride, but it will be a successful ride. So expecting that change, preparing for that change, and being, as a group on the platform, you will be in a situation where you can socialize that. Matt will do that with you as well. So as a community, what I say to everybody is establish that community. You're going to need it. Any single one business or a small group of businesses, not going to be it. We need to actually have communities around this. So, tick on that one. The leadership of our world needs to change, and what we do. At the moment, we've got a very divided world. I don't expect that to change anytime soon. But as a result of that, what we offer our audiences needs to change as well. So what that looks like, I'll describe what I've done so that I'll give you some idea, because obviously I'm going to be very generic here. If I was coaching any one of you, we'd have a specific discussion. So, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
using my own experience to give that specific. And so take the view right here, right now, that what you're going to offer to serve to your audience is going to change. So you're going to add to what you're already doing. I'm not saying we're going to take anything away, because the speed at which the transition works for you is going to be individual. But the idea is you effectively think of it as what I'm talking about as additional channels, additional coaching opportunities to add to what you already do. And I think that because leadership needs to change, sort of executive coaching, as it's called in that world, is actually an open offer to everybody now. And That doesn't mean to say we won't do one-to-one coaching. I still do that. I have 12 hours every single month, have done for the last 14 years to still do one-to-one. But we, in the communities we have, put in an offer together that actually allows us to go be one-to-one coaching so that you can understand how best to develop your offer. And so I think what I'm saying to you is put yourself in business development mode, because the world's already changed around us. The geopolitical environment's going to further destabilize. And so essentially have a business development hat on with everything that you do. And one of the things that works for most of the coaches that I train and that I work alongside and are part of my communities is developing what I call an influential voice. Now, I'm not talking about celebrity here. That's not at all what it is. But it's more understanding, meeting that need for clients as they evolve. So we're evolving our businesses, but clients' needs are evolving as well.
Yeah.
And essentially, tech is going to change our society, and it's up to us to make sure we are part of that human in the industrial internet of things, because we are, as a profession, key people to navigate, and I always think negotiate that change, because we have expertise with everybody that we coach that tells us a little bit more about what the gaps are, what works, what doesn't work. So I'll give you an example of that, because again, this is all quite generic. So I work in the G20, and what the way the G20 works is every year there's a transition from one government to another G20 government, and everybody envisages that future. So one of the things that you can take from that is whatever you're doing now, pick the start point. January 2025 is a good one, and say, this is what last year was like. How will we evolve it? What's the value add? And one of the things I do in G20 is I bring in what I call the unheard voices, which we know well when we do any group coaching, of people that we wouldn't normally meet, who have perspectives that perhaps we haven't heard. And then we start to see patterns that repeat. The difference is when I go to the G20, I might bring 34 million people that are under 30 into the discussion. So I do it at scale. It's something we call web intelligence. But you have that same opportunity to build your influential voice by looking for the patterns in what you're seeing. And I track those patterns because the tech itself, web intelligence tech, tracks it. But what I'm saying to coaches is, if you can, at the end of a month, just take 15 minutes and say what was new, what was different, what has changed, and then inform that for what you might do for the next month. Some people do it at a quarter level, but you'll definitely miss things. And while you're making this transition, if you're starting a monthly basis, just 15 minutes saying what happened, what did I learn, what might I change? And that's because there's an accelerating change. Technology is changing our society, but the speed at which it's doing it, now I've got 29 years of data across this, the speed and the acceleration since pandemic has been incredible. For pandemic, for example, 1 billion more people came online within 2 weeks. So that scale, I'm sure everybody, has got their own story about why it's accelerating. And the fact that people are hybrid working from a coaching point of view has actually created some real concerns. It's created some dynamics that are possibly not profitable, not healthy, not something we want to repeat. So keeping our humanity at the core of that, understanding your 15 minutes at the end of a month is a really key thing, because those are the things that will stand out. So because this is a global piece I'm talking about, this is the entirety of humanity who has access to online or is online themselves. The hybrid online offline piece is really important. So for example, I take some of my groups that are, I've just come back from Korea, I take some of my groups that would be normally online in some sort of coaching setting, and I bring them offline. So for example, in February of this year, 80 of the Fortune, I work with 192 of the 192 of the Fortune 500 CXOs. I brought 80 of them offline because there was enough of a change and enough of a pattern that we as a group could mobilize together. So you think of that in your coaching practice, it's a similar thing. If you explain that to clients, whether it's one-to-one or at group level, they actually will generally say, I don't have that option now. So there's your differentiator.
Yeah.
Are you doing that in a sector? Are you doing it across a particular landscape of change? Is it on a continent? How does it work for you? And then you can then say, well, that's a new channel. And then that new channel can maybe be offered geographically, or it can be offered across another sector, or it might be offered to a particular, say, role or career. And one of the things I like to point people to is when you did the transition to online, because everybody had to, or they didn't generally work for coronavirus, what did you do and what brought in new clients? And think back to how you had that mindset, well, how am I going to do this? I haven't dealt with it before. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We're actually there now. So it's literally, this is a tech driven change rather than a virus driven change. But if you can go back to that mindset that you had when you were navigating the landscape change for coronavirus, that's the
Yeah.
piece I'm talking about. And we call it in the empathy economy, which is what I founded, and I'm sure we can talk about that. I call that the infinite mindset, because it assumes you can't know, and it assumes there's no standard pattern. And of course, therein lies the opportunity, because we all know as coaches, we would be likely the sort of people to make that shift, and clients would struggle because that's why we exist. So I think that that's the best way of thinking about it from your own perspective. And literally that 15 minutes each month gives you taking that step back and a look at it, then says, well, do I change something the next month, or do I put something in, or do I explore something? So I've generally been advising people that 80% of what they do time-wise is what you know, and then the old 80-20 adage, the 20% of your time that perhaps you were doing something else with, that's what you're devoting to this. Now, if you don't do that, 15 minutes a month is good enough. But to actually accelerate your own USP in this world, I'm talking about of the industrial Internet of Things, those are roughly the metrics that are working.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and I obviously work with a lot of coaches and see a lot of coaches, using very legacy tech or even new tech that's been built in the legacy way, and they give the usual talk about, oh, we care about clients, we know how you're getting on, we care about your engagement, we know where you get stuck, where you don't get stuck. But the reality is they know none of that, because the platforms that they're using simply don't provide, they're too fragmented. They use 6 or 7 tools, and they don't provide access to insights and data, which is why we built the platform that gives them insights and data, so that they can start to ask those questions and gather that information and act on that information themselves. I think a lot of people are still very much well-intentioned, but holding themselves back from being able to do what you're talking about, that level of reflection at a deep enough level.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Matt, because if you don't get on board with that now and literally use the tech that is curating this change, there's no bridge. Nobody's going to bridge it. For those of us building this tech, we're turning off the legacy. I've had 158 emails today, and I said to my chief of staff, don't know what happened to my inbox. Can you find out for me? And the answer was, because she's good at this, she said, oh, this tool, which I'm not going to mention, is being withdrawn from January. It's a tool on which pretty much anybody that works on sustainability completely depends on. And it's being removed in January. No way back. Get your data off the platform. You've got X weeks. And of course, then in piles to my inbox as to, no, I've already got an idea about how we'll do that. But the reality of it is, expect that level of change, where suddenly, if you're not keeping up with the platforms and the tools that are actually working in this world, they're being changed from a cyber point of view, because we're learning so much about how businesses can be compromised in this geopolitical setting. But B, because other companies that provide you with these tools are already moving into the industrial Internet of Things. And so they're retiring a lot of this. Yeah, so Matt said he's already given you the first step because the platform's going to be there. So based on the platform that he's put together, that will give you some clue as to, well, am I aligned with that, or am I going to make my life difficult? So maybe when you've onboarded onto the platform, take a view as to what you needed to change. But then again, you've got a community on the platform. You can ask one another's questions. You can check. I've got 3 options. What's everybody using and why? And I do think that that whole piece of, you're not a technologist. I mean, the reality of it is there's only 19% of the world that can do any of the things I'm talking about, of which obviously I'm one. And the rest are consumers. Even if you're typing in prompts and you call yourself prompt engineer, you don't actually understand what sits behind that interface, and you couldn't build
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
And so take it more as a technology is going to change your business. I'm going to negotiate what my business looks like because I know what my clients need. So I think it's a different framing there, Matt. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not resisting, but being willing to, stay on top of and stay ahead of, for the sake of your own business, but ultimately for the sake of your clients as well, because, you
Yes.
may not like change, but let's face it, as a coach, change is kind of your currency. Change is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with change of other people and the change you want to help them go through. So I think you really owe it to your client base to do that in a way that's evolving in the way that the world is evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really well said. And so in that future focus, I mentioned it earlier about the empathy economy. As part of the Brexit negotiations for the UK with the European Union, I looked at the landscape of the potential change and thought this is going to be hugely disruptive. And so I had what I am told is the Canary Wharf rant. I didn't think I was ranting, but apparently I was. So everybody but me thought that. So it's I obviously was. I said we can't keep doing things the way we do things. We can't just put our futures in everybody else's hands, and we need to do something different. And I think the fundamental problem we've got is the business models and the commercial models of the sharing economy. Now that's the thing that you're all in, that you're all doing your work in. And so I was with 219 other founders. We were the founders of the digital economy in the UK back in 2016. We kept in touch. We continued to work together from 2009. So that I did this passion speech, which apparently is a rant now. So I have to think about not doing one of them again. And said we have to work this out. And there were a few people just like shaking their heads at me. And I'm like, what? And they said, Jacqui, nobody understands the industrial Internet of Things other than you. So how about you go away, work out what that means for us, come back and let us know. And today there are 10 million businesses in 175 countries, soon to be had 2 applications, so soon to be 177 countries, that actually have helped answer this question of what the industrial Internet of Things means for us, how to keep the human in the loop, all the rest of it. Mainly because when I did go away and do that, made my announcement in Davos, January 2019, everybody got on board because they could see their piece. It's a little bit like your story with the platform, Matt. Once you say, well, this is the thing I'm talking about, everybody on board. And they teach me every week, every day sometimes, what my priorities are as a coach, what I need to do next, which tech needs to be built. And one of those people happens to be 3 years old. He happens to be a climate enthusiast in terms of solving the puzzle, but he's a blue entrepreneur like me, and he cares about the oceans. So, I was talking to an investor a couple of weeks ago, and I said to him, stop giving your entrepreneurs a hard time. What is wrong with what he's doing? He said, he's 27. He thinks he knows everything. I said, I've got 11-year-olds that did their first exit for £16 million. I've got 3-year-olds who are designing the future as part of the UN. You don't need to be worried about a 27-year-old. Snatch his hand off, because actually the 11-year-olds and the 3-year-olds are what you need to be worried about. And I think, it's about taking that input from clients, sort of understanding it at a wider level, working within communities like I do in the empathy economy, and getting that full feedback loop. You're sort of on that. And I want to sort of give you how I do that every day, because
Yeah.
somebody asked me that yesterday, and it's like, well, how do you do that? And it's like, how do I do that? So this morning, when I was reviewing my notes, Matt, I thought I'll write that down. So the top 3 things I do every single day. Number 1, as a coach, I put my own oxygen mask on first, because I cannot do anything unless I'm fully functioning. Because in the environment I've described, nobody will be, or if they are, only for today. And the next time you have a session with them, they may not be. So self-care for us and what we do is absolutely vital. And all those things that we put to one side because it's for us, no, we need to do those first. And that's what I do. I
Yeah.
take 30 minutes at the beginning of every single day, an end of every single day, to make sure I've got my own oxygen mask on, because I'm not able to do what I'm describing without that. Understand our client bases are radically changing. That 29 years of scientific research, those people that I've designed and delivered for since I started that, they are under 30 today. So how many of your clients are under 30? A vast portion of them are for me in that bracket. And that might be like I do, I reach into schools, but let me give you the cohorts we're looking at, because it's different offers. Generation Z are 30, this is a social cohort, 31 to 21. They are currently influencing 40% of the economic spend across the world. So if anybody's under 30, listen to them hard, because they've literally got huge, true influence, in, not celebrity, as I said earlier, but true influence. Gen Alpha are 20 to 10 today. In pandemic, they came into universities. I had emeritus professors that I coach that said, do I have to retire? Who are these people? How disruptive are these people? And, I was sad to say that half of them did resign, because they just said, I don't want to do what they call, teaching. It's not teaching anymore. It's not what they need. More akin to our coaching, really. I don't want to do that. And it's like, well, as a coach, then if you don't want to do what the client needs, then perhaps you shouldn't be a coach. And they did,
Yeah.
half of that group did stand down. I'm not advocating you'll retire. I'm really not doing that. But that group, they are very comfortable with technology. The landscape has underpinned everything I've said today, and they will not negotiate with you the way Gen Z have. So if you're struggling with Gen Z and think they're a stroppy lot, then actually Gen Alpha is going to be a real challenge to you.
Yeah.
And then some of you, of course, are raising Gen Alpha. I've raised Gen Z. I know Matt is, I think you're raising the next generation, Gen Beta, but you will have your nieces and nephews if you've not got them children at that level. And you'll know that they approach things in a different way. And no doesn't mean no for them. And then Gen Beta, who are 9 and under, my youngest entrepreneur. We obviously do the coaching alongside his dad, but he is 3 years old, and he is an authority on the agreements around COP15 and the High Seas Treaty, because he's a blue entrepreneur like myself and cares about the oceans. So his focus is that one thing, doesn't really focus on anything else. He wants to know about that. He's got this idea that means he'll never have to go to school. I constantly tell him that that's not actually true, but he takes the view that, what do you know, Professor? You haven't made it work for me. You just have got a couple of more years, get school sorted so I can do useful things. And I think the reason for mentioning those cohorts is they're the engines of change from a humanity point of view. And so I regularly do outreach in universities. I'm there at one tomorrow, and I offer my services there. I regularly do go to schools when we've got young people choosing their options. School really doesn't outfit you for the world I'm talking about. So making the option choices are not easy these days. And then the third thing I do, which really underpins all of the empathy economy, is we don't compete. We collaborate and we don't compete. So sometimes it's actually, if you've got a group coaching session, maybe like in February, I talked about the 80 Fortune 500 CXOs. I wasn't on my own there. I took a coaching group. and we broke out into sessions. We did some of the innovation, the foresight pieces, and then came back together and then shared amongst it. So new coaching models, but they're always collaborative models, because competing, the idea that as coaches you're competing, not in the industrial Internet of Things, that's not the way the human will work. The human will look to be collaborative. In our case, my butler in one of our hubs that organises the hub, I collaborate with him if I want my dry cleaning doing and I want to some tickets booking and what have you. It's a similar thing. So I think if you step back and say, well, what are my collaboration opportunities? Or if you find yourself thinking, well, I could do that better and maybe I should, compete on that one. Just step back and say, is this the right thing? Because if we're going to be the humans in the industrial Internet of Things, competing is not going to be an option. So
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
are my top 3 tips.
No, amazing. No, thank you for sharing. That's really, really interesting. And I like what you're saying there about collaboration over competition, because I think so many people, coaches, consultants, etc., operate from a model and a mental model of scarcity rather than abundance. And the acceleration of technology that we've talked about is just connecting people like never before, opening up information and opportunity like never before. So if you're truly good at what it is that you do, have value to add, why wouldn't you seek a client first collaborative model versus putting guards up for fear of losing out on clients? Because that presumes you've already, the market has already been captured, the value has already been delivered, which clearly cannot be true.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's really important to sort of have that in your mind as we're approaching the end of the year. We're looking at taking the opportunities about what's presenting itself. Also, because I knew I was doing this podcast with Matt, I also spoke to my clients as I've gone through the sessions and said, they're quite used to me dropping a 2-minute or a 5-minute thing at the end, and said, of the things I do for you, what are the most valuable things in this new world? I.e., what do you look to me to do that you think, well, that, if she carries on doing that, I'll be with her forever? They won't actually, but that's their thinking. I give them influence because I understand the landscape that they operate in. And influence is not something sitting in a corner office on the top of a hierarchy, bossing people about what to do, because it's more that collaborative approach, that consensual approach, and being somebody who's centered and knows the domain I operate in. That I actually passed that on. And so that influence was their number one. You do that. And the second one they said to me was leadership. So I unpacked that because it's like, what does that mean to anybody? Because I work across my 8 companies in holacracy models, none of the companies are hierarchies. And so that means everybody has an equal input to something, and good ideas come from everywhere. And so obviously we have leadership because that's how, it works. There's the 2 founders and all the rest of it. But those models and operating around those models are starting to, the sort of general models of leadership are disintegrating across the world as we see the geopolitical landscape become untenable. People don't know what to do. And so being able to strategize with them about the leadership model they may be part of, the leadership model they're looking to create, and then literally developing that offer and that approach and that influence has been the second most valuable thing. Because I think once I've taught them the influence piece, then they're able to unlock their own leadership talents. And by using sometimes a curved ball, but quite frankly, that, that's an interesting one and what have you. And then the one I thought that would be at the top, because I make it part of what I do, is the mental well-being. I think that we've all had days, and maybe more than one time in one day, where the mental strain of what we're having to do, because of course we've got to be, like I said, we've got to have our own oxygen masks on in order to support our clients and take them forward. I often share what I do to do that, so I go into specifics. And so one of the things I'm very well known for is I've kept a gratitude journal for 27 years. People go, why would you bother? When they're clearly struggling with their own mental well-being and what have you. So that the fact I'm able to bring that into context. And frankly, sometimes if it's a curious one and I think, I'm not sure, then I will go out to the empathy economy linchpins, which are the people that hold these mission in each country, and say, what would you do about this? How does it look to you? How does that work? And they're all under 30. So again, they're in this new world that I'm talking about. And those are the three. So could you work any of those three into what you're already doing to take the first step into this new coaching world, into the industrial Internet of Things? I don't know. Worth reflection, worth, a conversation on the platform, worth dialoguing with Matt. I think that's what I'm almost 3 years as the year closes into this new industrial Internet of Things executive coaching piece. And that's what they told me when I asked what it was about and what they valued most. And I think the things we all do anyway are already valued. But what's the standout piece in helping them deal with this new world they're confronted with? That's what they gave me.
No, amazing. I think that's really interesting. And the thing that stood out for me there was what you said about, what is it that you can do that gives your clients influence?
Yes.
Like, to be able to reflect on that question, presupposes that you are really putting them first. You really know them. You really understand them and the world they operate in. And I think so many coaches, again, albeit best intentioned, stick to their kind of thin slice of the world and say, well, that's not me.
Right.
They can get that from somebody else. But I don't think the client shares that same perspective about what they're coming to you for.
No,
So I think that
was
is
their
a hidden
number one.
misalignment. Yeah.
It is, Matt. I think that's a really important point you've made there, because that was their number one. And it's not influence in a Machiavellian way. I'm not working with anybody like Machiavelli. This is people that are struggling to understand how they position what they do in order to, fulfill their purpose in life. And that was their number one, that influence. And literally, I was with a group of very senior tech women yesterday, and one of them said, you teach us to stand in our power. And there's and we discussed it a little bit yesterday, there's almost a way you stand, a way you conduct yourself, your approach, the fact you can have fun, and I mean, it's no more fun than 30 of us in a room and watch our world, because we put all sorts together yesterday, and so we're all ready to go on that. But that influence is something that I think this culture of celebrity has sort of worn away. And so that if you can build that into what you're doing as a coach, you'll find people they're yearning for it. As I say, it was my number one feedback. So I'm hoping that those three things that my client shared with me are what help inspire you to do what you do. But I'd like to ask Matt, would you indulge me on something that I always do? I haven't asked you about this, but I'm hoping you will.
Of course, please go for it.
So I have this little jar, which you can't see it behind me because it's on my desk. I have this little jar, and it's full of things from my year that have made a difference to my life. So I capture them. They're outputs from my gratitude journal, and I share them in my coaching sessions, and I share them in many other places, but this did seem to be the ideal place to share it. So just pick one at random. I have no idea what it is. Are you all right if I say this now? So this is for all of you. This is something that has stood by me now. I see what it is. Wake up a little earlier tomorrow and use the extra time to meditate, reflect, or enjoy yourself. So I put 30 minutes a day at the beginning of my day to do that. But if you start at 10 minutes, what would you do to meditate, reflect, or enjoy yourself if you just gave yourself an extra 10 minutes at the start of your day tomorrow? So that was the message for you all today.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. That's something for everyone to think about, and let us know what conclusion you come to, what it is that you're going to do.
Yeah, that would be great, actually, to know. There's so many varied answers to it. I know mine, and I'd love to know what you do. You're right with that, Matt. I just want to say one thing, because yesterday it came out loud and clear. People are struggling, and more than perhaps I'd understood. And we had a conversation about the future generally, almost to wrap up what I've said. And there's some concerns about it, there's some fears, and some people are genuinely struggling to put one foot in front of the other, and quite frankly, I understand that. My day job is in counter-terrorism. I've been on the front line of Ukraine for the last 2.5 years. I've had those days too. But when I reflect on where we are and I reflect on the message I've given you today, I will tell you the future is so bright for you, you'll need sunglasses. Because the question I got was, how are you looking at the future? What does the future look like to you? And my instant response, because nobody had asked me that question before really, is it's so bright you'll need sunglasses. So I'm really painting a picture of, you have the opportunity as coaches to stand up for humanity and make sure that technology brings a benefit to our society, because you bring your humanity to the work you do. But get some sunglasses.
No, amazing. I think that's good to hear, a positive sentiment and vision for the future. And you're right, as coaches, we should all uphold that positive vision and be a part of making that vision a reality as well, versus being, overly distracted by, whether it's media or whatever else, right? That, clearly is, biased towards the more negative, as a way to get engagement. But I think the, reality is of the future is still, net positive, and that always continues to be a trend. So I don't think we should lose sight of that.
No, and I just will add one thing to that. Obviously, you take that out into the world, you're going to get challenged with that, given what we're dealing with. But what I would always say to that is, opinion is the lowest form of knowledge. I have 29 years worth of data, so I can make that statement because I'm looking at the data. And so if what you meet as a response to that is, well, I don't agree with that, you just say thank you and thank you for your contribution, sort of thing, because everybody has an opinion. Now, if somebody's got some interesting data about why that's not true, I'm really interested, and Matt's going to share my contact details in the show notes and come back to me, because if somebody else has got data like I've been curating, maybe we could put that together and get a even more of a refinement of the future. But I say the future's bright, you'll need sunglasses, because I have the data that proves that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And for me, I'm a big data person as well, right? But I think, even, being a data-driven person, it can still be so easy to be distracted by opinion and swayed by opinion and overly influenced by opinion. Of course, you should consider people's opinions, right? But I think, make data and facts the thing that you're driving, key decisions on. And if someone comes up with an opinion that challenges you, why not seek out the data to validate or invalidate that? Seek out both.
It's really interesting you raise that, because I'm the co-founder of the data journalism industry, and I got stuck in Amsterdam. I'd spoken at a conference. Simon Rogers, who was head of the data blog at The Guardian, was also there, and we ended up with an impromptu dinner. And he said to me, I love what you do with data and the whole data engine. People call it data science. We're data engineers, really. It's a slightly different thing in the industrial internet thing. He said, I'd love that. And I said, well, I love what you do. The investigative journalist piece of it is great. And we decided that day to create something called the data journalism industry, because people love stories that conveys a message in a way that's very meaningful and very visceral for us all. But then if you found an industry, our mission was facts are sacred. The data always drives what we do, because that's the only thing that is a foundation. And today there are 7 million journalists, over 7 million journalists in that industry. Albeit there's only 8% of us that can do what I've just described across the world. 92% of the world wants to consume the output from something where facts are sacred. And one of the things that I always add to that is, people say, well, and I say, look, the news source, the number one news source in the UK is Twitter. I don't call it X, Twitter, because the chief twit told me himself in a blog post. So that's fine. What is it? It's free. We all know it contains disinformation. We all know that facts are not sacred on that platform. And so people say to me, well, how do you get around it? I pay for my news. I pay for investigative journalists that I disagree with, because they seem to know something I don't, so I should learn. And I want to leave you with one word that Gen Beta, Gen Alpha, Gen Z the one word that drives their world, the one word that drives our data journalism industry is curiosity. As you navigate the journey, if you can stay curious about this change that Matt and I have talked about today, you are in the right space. So when something comes along, you think, what is that? Then find out, be curious about it. And that will be the thing that will give you a coaching business like you probably could never imagine. Just staying curious for the industrial Internet of Things is the key to it.
No, amazing. And yeah, a great way to round off the conversation, and a great kind of lasting piece of advice there. Thank you so much for your time today. Massively interesting and hopefully useful and thought-provoking conversation for our audience today.
Hopefully. And it's been a pleasure, Matt. Thanks for inviting me.
No worries at all.